This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
عكس ما تشتهي سفن المعارضة تجري رياح السلطة في إيران اليوم صدر.
Things are not going as the Iranian opposition would like them to. Iranian authorities made two major announcements in Tehran. The first one said that Ahmadinejad will be sworn in for a second term on June 26th, and the new government will be sworn in on August 19th. The second announcement was the decision of the Guardian Council to reject the demands of the two losing candidates, Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi, to nullify the presidential election results. The spokesman of the council, Abbas Ali Kabkadai, announced the decision, saying that there was no forgery or violations in the elections. He said that the council's investigations have revealed that the number of regions where the number of the voting cards exceeded the number of the voters were only 50 regions, not 170 regions.
Luckily, we have evidence to show that no significant violations have taken place during the latest presidential elections. Therefore, there are no reasons to nullify the election's results.
The ban on public gathering in all Iranian cities not only applies to those who oppose the authority, but also to Ahmadinejad's supporters. The Interior Ministry said that it has not issued a license for the demonstration that was called for today by student unions outside the British Embassy in Tehran to protest London's position towards the recent events in the Islamic Republic. This comes as the Iranian Foreign Ministry denied what it was announced by a representative in the Iranian parliament that Tehran will call in its ambassador to London to protest what it considers British interventions in Iran's national affairs. Joining us is our correspondent, Rita Basha. Rita, the Guardian Council refused to nullify the results of the elections, and Ahmadinejad will be sworn in 3 days. Are there reactions from conservatives? What options remain for the reformers to take?
طبعا على ما يبدو أن الإصلاحيين لن يوافقوا على ما صدر من مجلس صيانة الدستور وهذا ما يتجلى واضحا.
Of course, the reformers will not agree to the Guardian Council's decision, which was evident in the statement that was released by the Mujahideen Council of Scholars, which includes former President Mohammed Khatami. This council said they will not accept the results of the elections and reiterated their demand that the elections must be held again. One can conclude from this statement that the reformers will not accept what was announced by the Guardian Council, especially considering that they have cast doubts about the neutrality of this council and its transparency in dealing with the Iranian elections. I think that the reformers have no options but to form an opposition in Tehran. They have no other choice. However, the decision that was made by the Guardian Council is not the final response pertaining to the elections appeals that were submitted by the reformers. We are waiting for the final statement that the council will release tomorrow. There are predictions, however, that the Guardian Council will not call for repeating the elections and that the elections results will remain valid.
Assuming that the Guardian Council will reject demands to nullify the elections, and considering that Khatami has refused the elections results, does this mean that there will be more demonstrations? And have the warnings of the Revolutionary Guards impacted the demonstrations?
طبعا التظاهرات لا يمكن التنبؤ فيما إذا كانت ستزيد.
It's hard to predict if the demonstrations will increase or disappear completely. However, after the warnings of the Revolutionary Guards, the demonstrations have decreased dramatically.
انخفض مستواها كثيرا واقتصرت على عشرات الأشخاص الذين يتجمعون في بعض المناطق.
Only dozens of people are now in the streets. They gather in some areas in Tehran. We saw this yesterday and last Sunday. We have not seen huge demonstrations like the ones that took place on Saturday and previous days.
Navi Pillay, the United Nations Commissioner for Human Rights, called on Iran to control the Basij militia, which is being accused of using violence against the Iranian protesters. She warned that the security situation in the country could deteriorate further. Pillay also expressed her concern over the increasing number of human rights activists and opposition members who have been arrested since the presidential elections. She urged the Iranian authorities to abide by the law.
خلف الكواليس مئة الأشخاص تم اعتقالهم منذ بدء المظاهرات في إيران.
Behind the scenes, hundreds of people have been arrested since the start of the demonstrations in Iran. Human Rights Watch called for ending what is described as a government crackdown campaign against peaceful demonstrators. The organization provided names of many of those arrested, confirming that it has not been able to determine the circumstances of all of these arrests, which include political and religious leaders in the reformist branch of the Iranian political landscape. In some of the cases that the group examined, the Iranian authorities did not provide any document or warrant at the time of the arrests. Until today, their families do not know where the detainees are being held. On the ground, any form of confrontation has become permissible. Members of the military unit Basij and government security forces use batons, tear gas, water hoses, and even live gunfire to suppress the demonstrators at times or to provoke them at other times. The UN Commissioner on Human Rights held the Iranian government responsible for ensuring that militia members and regular law enforcement agencies do not resort to illegal acts of violence. She called for an investigation into the circumstances of the deaths that occurred. Until now, there has been no official report about the number of people killed or wounded. The national television station indicated that about 10 people have been killed. A source from the opposition says that the number of those killed is much higher, in the hundreds. As for the injured, they got their numbers from human rights organizations, especially since they are afraid of being arrested once entering the hospital, after hearing a rumor that spread in the country that the Iranian authorities ordered medical personnel to inform them of all the patients that enter the hospital. No one in foreign embassies has announced that they will be opening their doors to take in the injured. Perhaps the scene of the arrest of a citizen of Hormabad, the capital Miristan, by the security forces explains why citizens and the wounded are afraid of being arrested. What is known is that Iran is a party to the International Convention on Human Rights, including the international treaty relating to civil and political rights, which it signed in 1975. According to the treaty, it must provide and guarantee basic human rights, including the right for peaceful assembly. In response, the Iranian authorities stated that the victims were killed by so-called unknown terrorists. They tried by all means to ban any images of physical and psychological abuse, which were committed against the demonstrators. But the few leaks that have come out are enough to clearly show that the peaceful demonstrations in Iran have claimed some people's lives. Hasina Usham, Al Arabiya.
To comment on what is happening, with us in the studio is Camelia Intikhabifard, a writer and researcher on Iranian affairs. Camelia, you are concerned and afraid about what is going on. Are the current events in Tehran reminding you of the past? Specifically, you were imprisoned for expressing your views in 1999 in Tehran.
Yes, I'm very upset. Yes, I am very upset, and I speak as an independent reporter. However, those who are being arrested in Tehran are touching my heart. Yes, these images take me back to 1999, after my newspaper was closed and I was arrested. Surprisingly, I was the first woman to be arrested in Iran at the time. I spent 3 months in solitary confinement. Until today, I've not been tried for the accusations made against me. This is the reality facing journalists who want to talk about the freedom of expression and want to conduct the good investigative reporting in the country. Today, there is no difference between the way men and women from the opposition are treated. The only difference is that the treatment of women is much harsher now than it was when I was imprisoned.
Iranian lawmakers have met to discuss relations with Britain. Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Commission has called for reconsidering ties with Britain. The meeting was also attended by Foreign Minister Manucher Mottaki. Lawmaker Qasem Jalali told Press TV that certain decisions were made in the meeting that will be announced in due time. Iranian officials have blamed Britain and some other Western countries for interfering in post-election incidents in Tehran. Meanwhile, Iran has expelled second and third secretaries of the British embassy in Tehran. British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has announced his government has expelled 2 Iranian diplomats in return. Earlier, student unions canceled a Tuesday rally scheduled to be held outside the British embassy in Tehran. The Interior Ministry did not issue a permit for that rally. Iran has rejected UN Secretary General's comments on recent protests over the country's presidential election. The UN chief has called for an end to arrests, threats, and use of force against civilians in Iran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hassan Ghashqavi called Ban Ki-moon's statements blatant interference in Iran's internal affairs. Ghashqavi says the UN chief has tarnished his international reputation by following certain domineering powers. He urged Ban Ki-moon not to ignore the realities of the June 12th elections. Ghashqavi said the 85% turnout showed the extent of democratic participation of Iranian political affairs.
Intelligence issues. People are sensitive about such interference.
And Iran's judiciary says it will form a tribunal to look into the charges of those arrested in recent street arrests. Iran's first deputy judiciary chief says the proceedings aim to teach the rioters a lesson. Abraham Raisi says the cases will be dealt with precisely and thoroughly. Raisi warned against making provocative remarks that would cause nothing but insecurity and unrest. He says people should remain committed to the guidelines offered by the leader of the Islamic Revolution and abide by the law. Iran's Air Force has launched the second stage of its aerial maneuvers over the Persian Gulf. The 3-day exercise successfully completed its first phase on Monday. The drill will see Iranian-made Syria jet fighters fly over a distance of more than 3,000 kilometers and hitting planned targets. The exercise is also expected to include electronic warfare tests and wireless audio signal transmission trials. Iran's Air Force commander says the drill is purely defensive in nature and aimed at improving the Air Force's operational capability. The final leg of the maneuver will be held over the Char-Bahar region in the Sea of Oman tomorrow.
Good evening and welcome to IBA News, coming to you from Jerusalem. In our top story, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Rome this afternoon on the initial stop of his first European tour since taking office. A short while ago, Netanyahu held a joint press conference with Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi. Reports indicate that Netanyahu will push Rome and Paris tomorrow to toughen sanctions against Tehran. Speaking to Italian television, Netanyahu said the current situation in Iran could mark a turning point.
If Iran acquires nuclear weapons, then their ability to intimidate, to give these weapons to terrorists or give terrorists a nuclear umbrella, this would push peace further back and darken the horizon. But if there was a change in Iran, this would work the other direction. It would give peace a tremendous opening. Peace between Israel and the Palestinians, peace between Israel and Arab states that share our concerns. I think this is as much a challenge as it is an opportunity.
Staying with the turmoil in Tehran, and there will be no new presidential election. A spokesman for Iran's top electoral body said today they found no major fraud in the voting and therefore it will not annul the results of the June 12th balloting. The ruling effectively slams the door on opposition protesters who claim there were widespread irregularities and have taken to the streets to demand another election. Meanwhile, the son of the Shah of Iran told the National Press Club in Washington that there will be dangerous and far-reaching effects if the Ayatollahs succeed in crushing the protest.
The courage of their conviction gives hope for peace and democracy in the most troubling region of the world. On the other hand, their defeat will encourage extremism from the shores of the Levant to the energy jugular of the world. At the very least, it will threaten regional tranquility and global economic recovery through fears of terrorism, slowdown of globalization, and steeply higher energy prices. At worst, fanatical tyrants who know that the future is against them may end their present course on their terms, a nuclear holocaust.
In other news, according to reports in the Palestinian media today, a top Egyptian intelligence official is in Tel Aviv for talks on deal over captured IDF soldier Gilad Shalit. Similar reports were found on an Islamic Jihad website. This after Israel expressed willingness to release more Hamas prisoners. Meanwhile, hundreds of demonstrators from across the country blocked several of the border crossings into Gaza to protest Shalit's 3-year-long captivity.
أفرجت السلطات الإسرائيلية عن رئيس المجلس التشريعي الفلسطيني عزيز دويك.
The Israeli authorities released the Palestinian Legislative Council President Aziz Douik after jailing him for 3 years. The release became possible after the Israeli military court in Ofer base rejected military prosecutors' demands to extend Douik's prison term. As soon as Aziz Douik was freed, he received a congratulatory letter from the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Sources from Fatah and Hamas movement say that there is an agreement for Abbas and Douik to meet as soon as possible. He is also expected to make a speech in meetings of the Legislative Council in Ramallah when he arrives there.
الدكتور عزيز سالم مرتضى الدويك شخصية يجمع كل من يعرفها على تميزها الأكاديمي والسياسي.
Dr. Aziz Salim Mortada Douik, for anyone who knows him, is a superior character both academically and politically. Not only does he hold 3 master's degrees and a PhD in city planning, as well as countless published works, but he is also an experienced politician. He is considered one of the most important thinkers and leaders of Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement. Abu Basham, as Douik is called, was born on January 12, 1948 to an Egyptian mother and a Palestinian father in Halil City. He joined the Hamas movement in his early years and spent his free time in Islamic preaching, as well as ideological and political work. He has upset the Israeli occupation, which explains why he was thrown in Israeli prison several times before he was exiled to Marj Zuhur in southern Lebanon in 1992, accompanied by more than 400 Hamas leaders, headed by his friend and fighting comrade, the late leader Abdul Aziz Rantisi. Aziz Douik was very happy to be called Rantisi al-Difa, or Rantisi of the West Bank, to show his admiration for Rantisi. In Marj Zuhur, while Rantisi spoke in the name of the Palestinian refugees in Arabic, Douik spoke in his name in English.
عام 2006 انتخب دويك بأغلبية الأصوات رئيساً للمجلس التشريعي الفلسطيني.
In 2006, Douik was elected by an overwhelming majority of votes to be the president of the Palestinian Legislative Council. In August the same year, the Israeli occupation arrested him at his home in Halil. This was done during a series of arrests that extended to 46 representatives in response to the movement's capturing of an Israeli hostage. In December of the previous year, the Ofer court issued an arrest warrant to jail Douik for 3 years. The main accusation against him was belonging to a banned organization, the Change and Reform Party, that represents the Islamic resistant movement Hamas in the Palestinian Legislative Council. Israel defined this party as a banned organization.
أطلق سراح الدويك بعد إتمام محكوميته ورفض المحكمة الإسرائيلية الأسبوع الماضي.
Douik was released after his prison term. Last week, Israeli court rejected military prosecutors' demand to extend his jailing time to 6 months longer for lack of evidence.
For the sake of becoming the head of the UN Education, Science and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO, the Egyptian cultural minister Farouk Hosni turned things upside down and left the door wide open for cultural normalization. A special report by our colleague Muna Ashmali.
The Egyptian cultural minister made a decision that created a major uproar. At this time, the translation of Hebrew books into Arabic and placing them in the marketplace at the expense of the Egyptian Ministry of Culture raises many questions. This especially after statements made by the cultural minister in May of last year when he said that if he could burn all the Hebrew books in Egypt, he would. This statement angered many Jews in Israel and other parts of the world.
بالتأكيد هذا نوع من أنواع التطبيع الثقافي. الغرض منه هو الترويج للكتاب الإسرائيليين وللمقولات.
Certainly, this is a type of cultural normalization which is aimed at promoting Israeli writers, their sayings, and the understanding of Israel. These books, which will be translated and put on the market for readers to buy, will certainly call for glorifying the role of the Zionist entity. There are books that talk about Israeli literature, which certainly have political aims. It is an attempt to present a different image of Zionists than their image of being rapists who occupied a land and displaced a people. They want to present a new image of Israelis. Certainly, the Minister of Culture resisted this for a long time. Now, it appears the situation has changed, not because of correct or principled positions, but because the Minister of Culture is a candidate to take up the position of General Director of the UNESCO.
The implementation of the translation project came after the minister agreed to it in his capacity as the president of the National Center for Translation. The center intends to contract with French and British publishers before the start of July to translate the Israeli works, thus avoiding working directly with Jewish publishers.
The issue of reading what is written in Israel has nothing to do with normalization. Normalization is direct communication with the Israelis and working with them, whether in Egypt or outside of Egypt. Unfortunately, the intellectual monitoring of what is happening in Israel came late in recent years. It has gotten to the point today that when we hear that a book or two books are being translated from Hebrew, it stirs controversy and is questioned as normalization.
فإذا كانت البداية ترجمة لمؤلفات كاتبين إسرائيليين يقال عنهما في الكواليس.
If the beginning is the translation of two books by two Israeli authors who are said to be culturally closer to the peace camp, then the rest of the books will be by authors from Israel who completely believe that Arab blood is cheap. In the face of a Zionist idea, whether they like it or not, they will draw its features from the Nile to the Euphrates. Soon, we will find that this book has been translated from Hebrew to Arabic and sold at various bookstores throughout Egypt, regardless of its content or what its words call for. But this is not important. What is important is that the Jews are pleased, rather that Israel is pleased with the Egyptian cultural minister, so as to guarantee his position as Director General of UNESCO. Muna Ashmawi, New TV, Cairo.
We now present this report of the latest security and political updates in Iraq.
Every time the representative election approached, the situation got farther from getting better. This is how things have become in Iraq, not only in the field of security, but also on the level of political assassinations. Thus far, 3 parliament members have been killed, highlighting the dangers that surround the political figures before the politics itself.
عمليات الاغتيال وعمليات الإجرام التي تحدث هنا وهناك يعني.
We imagine that the assassinations and crimes that happen here and there are part of the assimilation process that numerous internal and external factions are pursuing, especially when this political crisis happens as the election approaches. Some parties wish that the political process would not last in even the least convincing form.
العملية السياسية بشكل يكاد يكون مقنع.
The current tensions coincide with the American troops getting ready to withdraw soon from the cities and markets. From here, Iraq will have to rely on the security agreement, which would defer to the people's will. But the politicians are worried about the increase of attacks after the tanks leave.
We predict that the violent activity will come back from time to time, and the armed groups and organizations of Al-Qaeda will operate here and there to prove their existence. The withdrawal of American troops and their suspension of combat missions in Iraq is the biggest question now, above the worry for Iraq's true political power.
وإذا ما تحقق هذا التوقع فلربما يتضح الأمر في الانتخابات التشريعية.
If this prediction comes true, then maybe things in the coming legislative election will become clear. The Iraqi Eye Network is tightening its surveillance over the elections to make sure that the political parties follow the law, so as not to repeat the same mistake of changing the names but not the faces. The Council of Representatives is preparing to sanction the security agreement with the UK in the next few days, while conflicts are happening between the powers inside the parliament and on the streets outside of it. Who knows? Maybe whoever remains in the end will be the strongest. Doha Haddad for Abu Dhabi Channel, Baghdad.
Get more news about the Middle East online at linktv.org/Mosaic. The Mosaic webpage offers a complete archive of Mosaic programs, program transcripts, the Mosaic video podcast, and the Mosaic Intelligence Report, a weekly analysis of the hottest stories from the Middle East. The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible with the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.